Good morning. My name is Shoshanna Gross. I am the manager of major events with the Ohio Restaurant Association. Today, I am here with John Barker, our CEO and president. Hi, John.
Hey, Shoshanna. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. John is coming to us today from his home office because when you are the CEO and president of the Restaurant Association in these times, PTO is hard to come by. So I appreciate you stepping in when you are supposed to be taking some much deserved and needed time away.
Shoshanna, we all need to take our time, no question about it. But there's a lot going on. Our industry is right in the middle of, I'd say tumultuous times again. We were all hoping that, once we got through June, things might settle down a little bit and we'd get back to whatever normal is going to look like. But there's just a lot going on, and we're just trying to keep our folks in the restaurant industry up to speed. And so you and I'll try to do some of that today.
Great. Well, let's get started. We have some results from our weekly poll, which we've been doing now since March 13th or that week or so. What was in the findings this week?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things, and Shoshanna, you do a great job administering the poll each week, and putting everything together, and it's very helpful to lots of people, including our members. Just we send this to the governor's office, we provide it to members of Congress. We're one of the few states that continue to do something like this to make sure that we have data and science, behind anything that we're trying to move forward. Couple things that I've mentioned right away. Restaurants reopening is still around that 80% level. It really hasn't moved now for about 3 weeks. And what we're getting anecdotally on why the other 20% have not yet opened is they're in some kind of a specific situation. They're having a hard time maybe getting staff back. They're concerned about spending the money on putting up the barriers in restaurants, and considering that maybe things would change again in terms of the requirements. There's a whole host of individual reasons. And then there's a portion of people who are not planning to reopen. And we think that that's right around 12%. That's been pretty consistent around that number. And since we've been asking this specific question in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And so that's where we are. About 80% have reopened, and it's probably going to stay right around there. It might move up just a little bit because it's summer months, but we think that's going to stay right around there. Sales, which we have tracked, that's one question we have tracked all along. And, you may remember that at one point we were up around almost 80% of the restaurants. Once we started doing this poll, their sales were down anywhere between 20% versus a year ago to well over 70, okay? That number keeps getting a little bit better. What I mean by that, instead of being around 80% of those restaurants with those very tough numbers, it's dropped all the way to 57% with those kind of negative numbers. And so we are moving in the right direction. It's still hard to imagine a restaurant being down even 20% versus a year ago, because it's really, it's really difficult to make money in this business. But people are kind of chipping away at it. There's another group that's somewhere between down 5 and down 20%. And that's, where you can see people, by managing their cost and doing all kinds of other things, maybe they can get closer and closer to break even. And that's about 15% of the restaurants are, down in that, say, negative 5 to 20. About 7.5% restaurants are telling us they're flat. That's kind of a miracle, but even better miracle, 20% of our restaurants, their sales are up. And they're moving up, right? And so that means, we know there's a certain amount of pizza restaurants and fast casual and stuff like that, but we've actually talked to some other restaurants, even dine-in restaurants, that have moved their sales up by doing carry out, and being very aggressive with delivery and things like that. So fingers crossed it keeps moving in the right direction. You and I talked about this other question, and you added this in a while ago about face coverings. And it's getting a lot of attention by politicians. We've seen it in other states. So we asked the question, do employers think that wearing face coverings increase confidence of guests? And 63% of the people who answered that question said yes. And that's up from 53% the week before. So I think the drumbeat about the, whether it's the CDC or, our federal government, or even, mayors, governors talking pretty regularly about face coverings, is starting to get into the dialogue, and that number is moving up. we've had a number of states and local jurisdictions and restaurants start talking about face coverings as part of a requirement. And just yesterday, Cameron Mitchell Restaurants, which is a big group based in Central Ohio, Rusty Bucket, they announced that all guests will be required to wear face coverings when they go into restaurants. We also heard from Corso Ventures that they're going to announce today, and Corso Ventures runs things like Urban Meyer Pine House and Standard Hall. And we're hearing from others as well, some individual and independent restaurants that are doing it as well. So we're starting to see more and more conversation about the face coverings, because in other states, we've seen a bit of an uptick, in the COVID-19 cases. In some states, it's been a surge. And so I think getting ahead of that in any way we can is something that restaurateurs are thinking about and taking that position.
Yeah, and a lot of the studies tell us that the way that face coverings work is it's really the best if both people in the situation are wearing them. So it's nice to hear that restaurants are asking guests to participate in keeping everyone safe as well. We know that restaurants are doing everything they can from their end to keep their employees safe and their guests safe, but it's great when guests can chip in on that effort also.
Shoshanna, this morning we had the Restaurant Advisory Council meeting. This is the group that was put together by the governor to work on, DineSafe Ohio and all the things that are in place. And the Franklin County Health Director, who's on that committee, spoke about face coverings and how when there is a reported case in a restaurant, they go in and the first thing they start to ask is, was that person wearing a face mask? And if they were, they still do some, contact tracing, but they feel a lot better about moving forward and just making sure that person's out of the mix, but the restaurant can continue without having to close. If they were not wearing a face covering, they got to contact everybody. And those people then all need to also quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah.
So imagine if it's a host person, right? And they're the ones with a confirmed case, and then they exposed, a fairly large group of coworkers, then that may force you to have to close down. So that was just kind of an interesting point that, and all the health departments feel this way. So it was just interesting to hear that.
Yeah. As you mentioned, we are seeing some increase in cases in other states, also in Ohio. We know that Governor DeWine has been addressing this a little bit, and I know that you wanted to say a few words about what we're expecting to hear from the governor.
Yeah, so Monday he did his press conference, and he extended the DineSafe Ohio order, and we did include that in all of our communications, but it seemed like some people missed that, right? So that's been extended for about a week. So he announced that Monday. He said we're going to extend it for a week, but he also signaled that on his Thursday press briefing, which is tomorrow, that he will be giving an update. And so all the requirements and recommendations are still in place, no change. You can go look at those right on the website, our website. You can look at it on the ohio.gov site for COVID. But we do expect an update on Thursday. And here's what we think they're working on. And this has been reported in the media as well, that moving to a county by county system for COVID procedures and recommendations, meaning the jurisdiction would move more to local governments. And this would include a process similar to what you see when Homeland Security has levels of threats, that it would move to something like a red, orange, yellow, green levels. That's what they're looking at, some kind of process like that. We don't have any more details on that, something that we knew a small group has been working on. One of our members from the Restaurant Advisory Group Council is on that group, and so we're waiting to hear more about that tomorrow. And when that comes out, we'll work to get the interpretation and get that information out to everybody.
Great. So tune in 2 p.m. Wine with DeWine tomorrow. See what's happening. Federal updates. Are we seeing anything coming out of the federal government?
Yeah, a couple things. Yesterday, the Senate cleared legislation to extend the deadline on the PPP. So businesses can still apply for the PPP if this makes it all the way through. So that's just one part of Congress. But the reason is it expired on Tuesday, meaning that if you had not gotten the PPP or you waited too late or something like that, you're out of luck. So Senate took that up because there's there's billions left. I know those are big numbers, but there's still a lot of money available. So they passed it by unanimous consent, which was great. And so what they're trying to do is extend that deadline to August the 8th. That'll now go to the House for their consideration. And if they pass it, then it'll go to the president's office for his signature, and that would extend it to August 8th. There's a lot of work being done looking at the next phase of any kind of support that might be available for businesses, particularly in our case, restaurants and a lot of small businesses are in the mix on this. So we've been working, Shoshanna, with the National Restaurant Association, their public affairs team. Same group we've been working with for years, but we really work closely with them now, particularly on all these issues. And we're starting to go through a prioritized list of things that we're going to go back and perhaps put a new version of the restaurant industry blueprint for recovery, which is already out there. We put that out in March. We're going to go back and we're going to look at, and we're going to actually ask members to weigh in on this. So look for a phone to action coming out from the National Restaurant Association. It would be these kinds of things: additional funding for payroll and rent, liability protection for businesses against COVID claims, some tax benefits, business meal deductibility, an adjustment of the SNAP program, which is really what people used to call the food stamp program. Right now, it's primarily for use in grocery stores, but what we're trying to do is extend it to restaurants. And then two other issues. One, addressing the $600 per week unemployment benefit that's still in place, which ends at the end of July. And then there's a lot of questions about what's the best thing going forward with that, to try to encourage people who can't get back to work, those who still need protection to still be protected. And so that's in the mix as well. And then lastly, pandemic insurance going forward. It's something that we lobbied hard for, to try to get, these pandemic claims covered by insurance companies. We were not successful in that one. But what about going forward, right? So we're gonna work on that. So we're working on all this, and more to come, hopefully in early July. We realize restaurants are still hurting, and we know that once the PPP funds run out, that restaurants are going to be back in a pretty tough place pretty quickly. So we're working very, very diligently on that.
Great. Definitely, if you do already have a PPP loan, there are calculators out there to help make sure that you're getting the most out of those loans. And then, if you are still looking for some relief there, or didn't get a loan in the first 2 rounds, the extension is for you. So that's really good news.
So Shoshanna, the calculator is one that you helped put together with William Vaughn, one of our partners. And so folks can go on to I believe on their website, right, to get access to that William Vaughn company.
Yep. And that's a really great tool, just to make sure that you are using those monies the best way possible, so that you pay back as little of that loan as possible.
Right. You want to get the maximum amount of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of good news. We have a little bit of more good news kind of going into this long weekend for most people. With our Restaurant Relief Fund, we've announced a Perseverance beer that's been a collaboration of 9 different breweries. They've been opening up and releasing beer at the same beer at these different breweries around the state. So I know that Three Tigers Brewing is releasing their Perseverance beer today. So that's in Granville, Ohio. If you're looking to try something new, you could get out there and check it out. Who else is participating?
So yeah, this is great, because a portion of the sales from all this beer goes back to the relief fund. So we're excited about that. By the way, it's interesting when I really, doing my research on this, because it's important to do research.
Testing research.
We found out that each of the brewers, their taste of the beer and how they make it is going to be slightly different, even though the name will be the same. So that'll be fun. So it won't be the same exact beer everywhere you go. It'll be a different taste everywhere you go. So that'll be fun. But last week, Combustion Brewery and Tap Room and Outer Belt Brewing came out with their versions of Perseverance. So you can get it from those 2 locations, which is great. And then going forward, and this will be really in July, Dank House Brewing Company, Platform Beer Company, Seventh Sun Brewing, Zaftig Brewing, Land Grant, and Grove City. Those are the breweries that will be coming on. And again, they're great. They've been great partners in this, and each one of them will be giving a portion of their sales to the relief fund. And we continue to get applications, Shoshanna. And so these are people that are still not back to work, or maybe they're back to work, but their income is still significantly lower because maybe they're not getting enough hours. Capacity is down in whatever location they're working in, so they're not getting the tips. Just all those things that go into working in our industry. So we're going to keep working on the relief fund, and we're really pleased that these breweries have stepped up and being a great part of the community.
Yeah, it's always nice when you get to drink beer and do social good at the same time.
It's almost too good to be true.
So check out any of those breweries for Perseverance Beer here between now and end of July. That is it for us today. Thank you so much again, John, for taking the time, and we will see everyone next time.